Hey kids, Oldman shouting at clouds. Back for another week of Oldman plays CFL Fantasy and Pick 'em. Cold weather's getting here. Running game's important. Gotta break out the cold weather gear. Hey, football gets fun right about now. Not only, the last game of the season, so yeah, it'll be may not be the best football this weekend, but playoffs are a week away when it really matters. Oh, anyway, so it's also our last week for Fantasy and Pick'em. Although I understand Pick'em's going to have a playoff version. I haven't quite figured that out yet. So this week, or last week, my recap, as I talked last week, I leaned on Hamilton. I went with Bo and Tim White and Greg Bell, and that turned out okay. They had 111.1 points for me after the first game without anybody else involved. And everybody else that I had played fairly well too, with the exception of Standback, who got pulled out, I think, in the first half, so scored lower. I ended up with, 169.4 points. It put me 104th on the CFL Fantasy page, all the players. That's the closest I've ever come to sniffing that top 100. A big contrast from week 5, where I had 74.4 points and was 4,897th. So I'm finishing strong with last week anyway. Well, hopefully this week we'll get the same thing. Pick'em, I went 2-1. Leaves me, depending how you count them, 50-27 or 48-27-2. So somewhere around about a 66% point. I'm quite happy with that. Before I started doing the show, I was always looking at the predictions from people on podcasts and the different articles on 3 Down Nation and CFL.ca and whatnot. I figure the people there, they do this, for a lot of them it's their jobs. They should know what they're talking about. It gives them a lot of credence on their picks. And so I kind of went that way. This year I started paying attention and I realized that at 66% I'm up there with the best of them. I don't see many more that have that. So I'm feeling good about my year. And hopefully some of the stuff I've said here will help you guys out too, and maybe your years have been good. So let's get on to this week. What are we going to do? Well, this is a tough week for fantasy, needless to say, because the biggest problem is not picking who the performers are going to be. It's picking who's going to stay in the games. I mean, we've got the depth charts for the first 2 games, so we know who's in and who's out, and that helps. The last 2, we just know who didn't participate in practice or who was limited and whatnot, and so it makes it a lot harder. But looking at the games, starting with the Hamilton-Ottawa game, we'll talk a bit more about this in the Pick'em, but basically it's an interesting game because Hamilton's got nothing to play for, Ottawa's got nothing to play for. But Ottawa's not been playing well lately and may want to make a statement. Hamilton may look at, wanting to try out, see how Powell and maybe even Tui Jr. does, see what they've got there. So I don't know if I think Brown will stay in the whole game. But let's start with Hamilton. Now, Bridges is definitely out. You know that. He's been out the last couple of weeks and he's ruled out. Bo may get the whole game. And even if he doesn't, in a half game, he may score more than any other quarterback in a full game the way he's been playing. So that's a choice. Might want to team him up with Tim White. That worked for me last week. And with Bell as a running back. Bell and Litre are the only running backs listed. So unless they're going to go to Litre in the second half, I don't think so. I think Bell's a good choice. With Ottawa, Hardy is out again this week. So he's been a staple choice all the way through for me, and I think for several people. Be aware of that. Brown, like I said, I don't see the point in not giving him the reps and getting him as ready for the playoff as possible. They may protect him, but I don't know. So might be a choice. Addison's there starting at running back, and he's really the only running back they have other than Dedmon. So how well will he do as a running back? If you feel like gambling, if you want to make up a few points or take a gamble and, maybe lose a bunch by going with him, there's a chance. Maybe put him in at your flex. You could think about that. And Pimpleton, I think he'll probably get a lot of playing time, and I think he's probably the most attractive receiver left on that roster. I mean, Ackland is playing from what I saw, but those are basically the 3 I would stay with. The Edmonton game, Sergei Malala is out again this week, and MBT is not dressing. He's a healthy scratch, so I have a feeling he'll be playing somewhere else next year if he plays. But we've got Ford, who should be in the whole game, because are they going to look at Doge? I don't know. Why? And otherwise, they've got Prukop, and everyone knows what Prukop is. So Trey's a good bet, I think, to stay in for the game. And then same thing with the receivers. If you get somebody hurt, you're not saving them for the playoffs. So maybe Lewis, maybe Mitchell, and maybe Rankin. Thinking of it that way. That, and then when we get to Toronto, they're sitting a lot of people, they say. And they do. They've got some players out. They're definitely sitting. Well, they show the Chad as the number 3 quarterback, so he'll be dressed. But they say he's sitting, emergency only. And they also show Grant is out. And I question who else will get a whole lot of reps. Polk might be a receiver choice. Coxie might. And they're starting McMahon ahead of Carey, so he might be a choice. Montreal, who knows? Maybe when we see the depth charts, maybe Cody, maybe Mac if he's in there. I think Winnipeg, well, there's no depth charts out yet, of course. And their injury reports, everybody's questionable, so you don't know. They say Whitehead's questionable, but I wouldn't put any credence in that again because he's been questionable for I think since he was signed. So I would think we probably got most of them. Zach will be a quarterback you'll know will be in there all game, and depending on who Montreal plays on defense, may have a big game, but he hasn't been performing well, so I'm iffy there. Lawler they need the game, so he'll play the whole way, and he should get some. And then Brady Oliveira, he's that Montreal defense, even if it's at full strength, its Achilles heel is the run. It tends to give up some runs. So Brady's an expensive choice, but a good one. And then when we look at the last game of the weekend, Calgary at Saskatchewan, well, Calgary's got a lot of people that did not participate all week. Will they play or not? Hyman, hasn't played the last 2 weeks, so I'm thinking no. But Mills is also on the did not participate list all week. Schultz is on there, and Tucker is on there. So again, wait for depth charts, but if they bring Mayer out as a starter, if Schultz isn't able to play, he might be a good bet. I mean, he'll probably at least get the whole game. Are they going to put Tommy Stevens in instead? And we've already heard that P.J. Walker will not be playing in this game. He's keeping his options open, and that's an interesting little situation there. They were talking about it on the Piffles podcast the other night, and they mentioned the fact that Calgary traded for the rights to him off of Toronto's negotiation list, got the rights for him, brought him in, signed him to the practice roster so that they could look at him and he could look at the team, but haven't signed him to the roster. So at the end of the season, he'll be released from the practice roster, and he's no longer eligible for the negotiation list because they've already signed him. So they brought him in, traded away a draft pick to get him, and possibly will never see him. Plus, if he decides to come up, and there's a lot of people saying he might be a good CFL quarterback. So if he does decide to come up now, he's basically free to sign with any team that offers him a contract. He can go to a bit of a bidding war for it. If that's right, if they had that correct, Calgary probably screwed up there. But anyway, back to the fact that maybe Mayer was there. Bagleton's always a good pick with Hamilton. He's usually gets, 60 to 100 yards on a half a dozen or more catches, so he'll get you double digits points, if not better, on almost every week. In some weeks he goes up big. He might be spelling off with Logan, but he might be a good choice. Again, we've got to see the depth charts. I'm basing my picks here on not seeing the Saturday depth charts. If there's any real surprises, I may make a change. So, there's that. Saskatchewan, well, Armstead was on the limited list for the week. I don't think we'll see him in there. I don't see a way that they get him and Ouellette on the roster together. It'd be nice if they did, but I don't think so. And they'll want to get Ouellette prepped for the playoffs, I'm thinking. So maybe Ouellette, and then we don't know in this game. If they're playing for first, if Winnipeg loses, Trevor would be a fantastic quarterback choice. But if Winnipeg wins, they may not play him for more than a quarter. So who knows? So I figure maybe KSB at the receivers and maybe Stearns. Stearns has been coming on a lot lately, especially if Myers is getting healthier and they've got a little bit of an option there. They may take more of a chance. They got to leave somebody in. You know, who is it going to be? So that might be your best bet. Anyway, I went through all of that, and what I came up with, what I could afford was this, based on my best guesses. The team will be at quarterback, Trey Ford from Edmonton. I figure they want to keep him in for the whole game, see what he's got. He is a good quarterback. That Toronto defense is good, and they are starting all their starters, but how many will be playing, through the game? I don't know. So running backs, I'm going to go with Bell from Hamilton because he's the only one that they've got other than Litre. And Oliveira from Winnipeg because they've got something to play for. Winnipeg's run game is good. Montreal's run defense is the only sort of weak part of that Montreal defense. He should get some yards. Receivers, I went with Lewis in Edmonton to team up with Trey because, again, why take him out early? No need to save him unless you're going to be looking at others, but I think he plays the whole game. Pimpleton in Ottawa, I'm a little iffy on that. He may get brought out early, but I'm trying to stick under the cap, as it were. And then I've got Lawler at Winnipeg in my flex position, and I went with the Saskatchewan defense because they're the best one available that I could still afford, and I have $100 left over, 0.1K. I really wanted to try and put Rankin in, so I tried moving Lawler to the wide receiver spot and put Rankin into the flex position, but unfortunately I was $1,000 short. I couldn't make it work. I would have felt better if I could have played that through, but I didn't. So there's where we're at. Now pick 'em. Pick 'em again. Who knows? Who's going to play? What does it matter? Does it matter? Doesn't it matter? I don't know. So not going to be a lot to talk about with these games. It's almost all speculation. Start out with Hamilton at Ottawa. I feel like Ottawa needs a win here. They're going into the playoffs. Yeah, they had that last 3 minutes against Toronto that looked pretty good, but other than that, they haven't played solid football in a while. Hamilton's going to be maybe pushing Bo for the MOP, but he's already got the 5,000 yards, so does he get a full game? Does he get a half game? Does he get a quarter? What are we going to see? I don't know. They may be playing Powell, or like I said, they may play Tui Jr. for a quarter to see what they've got with him. I think Ottawa. Overall, they've got something to play for. They want to look good going into the playoffs. They want to give Toronto some things to think about. They're a much better team this year than they have been in the past. They still have a ways to go, but I think that they'll have enough to get past Hamilton here. So I'm going with Ottawa. So then we get to Toronto at Edmonton. Toronto says they're sitting the Chad. They list him as third string, so I expect he probably won't get in. They're also sitting Grant, so don't know who's going to be doing the returns. And how many of the other players will they be pulling out early in the game once they've just had a few reps to keep them sort of in touch and clean and not getting anyone hurt? Whereas Edmonton's got nothing to save people for. They don't have MBT in there, so it's going to be Ford. And as I said in the pick'em part, why look at Dogie or Prukop? So I think Ford gets the whole game. And I think that maybe they win just because of that. Frankly, they played a Dukes-led Toronto team to a 3-point loss in Toronto. Barely lost that game. And I think they're a better team now than they were then. Toronto's going to be, like I said, foot off the gas. Yeah, so Edmonton there. Then Winnipeg at Montreal. Well, not a whole lot to say. Winnipeg needs to win. I got no idea how Montreal's going to play. They could go all in because they haven't had their offense playing well. They may play all their starters for a half or 3/4 of a game to try and really make sure that they're locked in before they go into their bye before the Western Final. Or they could sit everybody so that if Winnipeg thumps them, it's not really a big thing. We weren't trying. And it means that there's no real sort of reason to think that what happens in this game would have any impact in a Grey Cup matchup between the two of them. So they could go either way. I don't know. But I know Winnipeg has something to play for. As much as the Saskatchewan fans really are hoping for the loss, I don't see it. So, Winnipeg. And then the Calgary-Saskatchewan game. There's another one. You know, if Winnipeg wins, Saskatchewan can just start sitting people. You know, maybe Trevor gets a quarter or less and Patterson gets some more. Maybe we get to see Cohen finally. There's people talking about him as being the quarterback of the future. So who knows? But frankly, it's too late for the Stamps to play for anything, even Pride. There's none left. An interesting bet this week may be the over-under on how many teammates Cameron Judge headbutts. You know, so that doesn't look like a team that's going to go that well. And frankly, the Riders could probably sit everybody and just bring the Regina Thunder CJFL team, the junior team up from, and they would win this game, I think. So Saskatchewan. All right, and that's it. This will be the last week. We might do a short pick'em one next week, depending on how that all plays out. 2 games, I don't know. Maybe the pick'em in under a minute is enough to give my stuff out there. We'll see. We're adapting as we go, just like every team in the playoffs. But here we are. We finished off this. The team that we've got, again, just to recap, Trey Ford at Edmonton for the quarterback and captain. Bell from Hamilton as a running back, along with Olivier from Winnipeg at the running back. Wide receivers will be Lewis of Edmonton and Pimpleton of Ottawa, and my flex will be Kenny Lawler of Winnipeg. Finishing off with the Saskatchewan defense and $100, 0.1K left over. The pick'em, I'm going Ottawa, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Saskatchewan. So that's pretty much it for this week. I will do a short show next week. Whether there's anything new to talk about going ahead, I'll just do that to give a recap for anybody who cares how my year worked out. Take a little bit of time to go back on that. Might be worthwhile to listen into just for some strategy points, because I'll go over a bunch of the things that I've learned when I started taking fantasy more serious this year. But that's for next week. We're all done for this week, so I'll end with my usual beg segment. I'm really trying to get this channel on YouTube and frankly on the podcast up and going, and it's gaining some traction. I figure I hurt myself early in the year because this was my rookie year, and looking back at especially some of the early episodes of the CFL Outsider, that's pretty cringeworthy stuff. Hopefully I'm getting smoother. I'm going to do some other podcasts in the off season. I'll send out a teaser on that down the road a little bit, and you can check in on those if you want. Hopefully next year when I come back to this, I'll be much more polished and we can really get this thing up and going. But for now, just to get people a taste of what's going on, please do the stuff. Share. And I know everybody says share, but keep in mind, old man here, I intentionally don't do social media. I don't need that aggravation in my life. It's too easy to get all worked up over everything the world's doing. So I protect myself and stay out of that, other than YouTube and doing this podcast. Oh, and CFL Reddit, which is, yeah, I guess, social media. So if you know anyone that may like this, if they're casual acquaintances, anybody who's a football fan, please share this out. Put it into the Twitter X, or whatever they call the stuff now, X, Twitter, and the Instagrams and all that stuff. Put it out there for me. You guys be my PR people. Share this, see what people have to say. Put it in with a disclaimer. Kind of iffy stuff, but take a look. Might get some more people watching. I'd love it. Other than that, please share, like I said. Please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, and apparently with YouTube, it's important to hit that notification bell now, too. I don't know why, but that's what the YouTube gurus tell me I'm supposed to be asking you to do, so that's what I'm doing. If you're a pod catcher, if you're a pod preferer, if you like listening to this on the pod, you can still subscribe, you can rate me, and you may not be able to leave a comment like on YouTube, and please, YouTube folks, leave the comments. Let me know what you like and don't like. But I'll also throw up my email right down here again one more time. Oldman, one word, dot, shouting at clouds, all one word, at shaw, SHAW.ca. There we go. I think that pretty much covers everything. Hope we do get some entertaining football this weekend. One, maybe potentially two meaningful games that could be worth watching. Hopefully the others, there are enough people out playing just because they love football, and the games will be good enough to be entertaining. That's what I'm looking for. It's been a bit of a dredge the last few weeks trying to get to the end of some of these games. Let's hope we've got a good weekend, and fairly sure that going into the playoffs, that first weekend may be a blowout weekend in places. We'll see. That's the way it's trending a bit. But for now, we've got this one to get through. Good luck for each of you with your last week of Pick'em and Fantasy for the regular season. And until next week, get the hell off my lawn!